The fog was particularly thick as Alex Mercer walked through the gates of the old cemetery. It was just past midnight, and the moon, obscured by a heavy mist, offered little illumination. Alex, a mystery novelist in search of a spark for his next ghost story, felt the setting was perfect, eerily quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves underfoot and the distant tolling of a church bell. With his flashlight in one hand and a voice recorder in the other, Alex began to explore. As he walked among the time-worn gravestones, he mumbled potential lines for his book, playing with phrases that evoked the supernatural. An echo of footsteps in the mist, as if the dead whispered among themselves, he said, enjoying the way his voice cut through the silence. It was then he noticed the light from his flashlight dim slightly. Pausing, he repeated the line. The light dimmed again, this time more noticeably. Intrigued, Alex tested other phrases. Ghosts, he whispered, and the light faltered. Haunt, he continued. The light waned once more. Death, and it nearly went out. He chuckled nervously, attributing the phenomenon to a dying battery, though part of him wasn't quite convinced. Determined to delve deeper into the mystery, Alex ventured further into the cemetery. The fog seemed to thicken, swirling around him as if it had a life of its own. The temperature dropped, sending a shiver down his spine. He continued to test the odd phenomenon, speaking various words and phrases, noting which ones affected the flashlight. The connection between the words and the dimming became undeniable, each flicker forming a pattern he couldn't yet decipher. As he reached the cemetery's oldest section, the air grew colder, and the ground beneath his feet felt softer. Alex noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The whispers seemed to grow louder, almost urgent, as he approached a cluster of particularly ancient gravestones, worn by time and covered in moss. He read the names and dates aloud, his voice recorder capturing every word. Eleanor Rigby, 1821 to 1845, he said, and as he did, his light dimmed so much that it nearly went out, only to flicker back to life as he moved on to the next name. Jonathan Rigby, 1819 to 1845. Again, the light responded. Alex felt a thrill of fear mixed with excitement. These responses were too consistent to be mere coincidences. He decided to delve deeper into this mysterious interaction. As he spoke, he began to piece together a narrative from the names and the dates on the tombstones, suggesting a family bound by tragedy. He paused, taking a moment to record his thoughts on the voice recorder. It's as if the cemetery itself is listening to me, reacting to the names of those who are buried here, he mused. The fog seemed to pulse in agreement, enveloping him in a soft, cold embrace. He felt a connection to the past, a thread stretching through time, tethered to the words he spoke. Continuing his exploration, Alex noticed the faint glow of a light not sourced from his flashlight. It flickered in the distance, like a candle in the wind. Drawn to it, he followed, his heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation. The light seemed to dance just out of reach, guiding him deeper into the cemetery's heart. As he followed the light, the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of silent screams and hushed pleadings filling his ears. The sound was disorienting, the words indistinct yet full of emotion. Despite his fear, Alex felt an overwhelming need to understand, to connect the dots that would reveal the story hidden in the mist. The light led him to a decrepit mausoleum, its gates creaking in the wind. The names on the facade matched those he had read earlier. The Rigby family. The realization hit him with a wave of cold air. This was the source of the cemetery's whispers, the heart of its haunting. He stood before the mausoleum, the whispers now clear, calling out to him, beckoning him to uncover the truths buried within. Alex stood before the mausoleum, hesitating. The eerie whispers seemed to be emanating from within, each one echoing the sorrow of the Rigby family's untold history. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the heavy iron door, its hinges groaning under the weight of years. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of mold and decay, but also charged with an unexplainable energy. As he stepped into the shadowy interior, his flashlight flickered violently, responding to his whispered narration into the voice recorder. Inside the heart of the Rigby family's final resting place, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it seemed to resonate throughout the entire chamber. The dimming of the light was now accompanied by a subtle vibration in the air, as if his presence and his words were awakening something long dormant. Alex moved deeper into the mausoleum, his eyes scanning the ornate crypts that lined the walls. Each crypt bore a name and a date, and as he read them aloud, the air around him seemed to pulsate with a quiet intensity. The names matched those on the gravestones outside, confirming his suspicions of a tragic narrative interwoven with the cemetery's soil. The deeper he ventured, the stronger the manifestations became. Shadows darted in the corners of his vision, not quite taking form but undeniably there, responding to the sound of his voice. He continued to speak, his narrative now a lifeline threading him through the palpable darkness. The Rigbys, a family united in life and in death, he said, his voice recorder capturing every nuance of the chilling atmosphere. The ground beneath his feet felt unnervingly soft, as if he were walking over a freshly dug grave. With each name read, a soft moan echoed back, a sorrowful acknowledgement from the past. It was as though the mausoleum itself was breathing, exhaling the heavy history held within its walls. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing his flashlight completely. Plunged into darkness, Alex's senses heightened. He could feel the chill of the air seeping through his clothing, the whispering more pronounced as if the darkness amplified their desperation. Despite the blackness enveloping him, Alex pressed on, guided by the ethereal glow that seemed to originate from the heart of the mausoleum. As he approached, the ground vibrated beneath his feet, the whispers crescendoing into a coherent voice. It was a woman's voice, filled with both grief and anger, narrating a tale of betrayal and woe that led to the mass demise of her family. The voice told of a sinister betrayal by a trusted friend who had poisoned the family's dinner one fateful evening, motivated by a forbidden love and a twisted envy. As each member of the Rigby family succumbed to the poison, their spirits remained, tethered to the mortal realm by their unavenged deaths. Alex listened, spellbound and terrified, as the spectral voice recounted each death, each moment of agony. The air around him grew colder with each word, the sorrow of the tale manifesting as a physical weight upon his shoulders. He realized that these spirits were not malevolent. They were victims, trapped in an endless loop of their final, tragic moments. Feeling a responsibility to those voices, Alex spoke a promise into the darkness, vowing to tell their story, to bring to light the truth that had been buried with them in the cold earth of the cemetery. As he made this vow, the atmosphere in the mausoleum shifted. The oppressive air lightened slightly, as if his promise had lifted part of their burden. With his pledge hanging in the chilling silence, Alex found his flashlight flickering back to life, its beam weaker but steady. He used the light to find his way back to the entrance, the whispers now soft and mournful but less desperate. As he exited the mausoleum, the door closing behind him with a resolute clang, he felt a subtle shift, as if a small piece of the heavy history he had uncovered was now his to bear. Outside, the fog seemed to have thickened, wrapping the cemetery in a tighter embrace. Alex walked back through the gravestones, each step lighter than before, though the weight of the story he now carried was palpable. He knew his novel would be more than just a tale of ghostly hauntings. It would be a testament to the memories and tragedies of those long forgotten. His voice recorder, filled with the eerie accounts from the night, would serve as his guide to weaving a narrative that could perhaps grant peace to the restless spirits of the Rigby family. As he left the confines of the cemetery, the first hints of dawn began to touch the sky, the darkness receding and with it, the intense sensation of being watched. Alex emerged from the mausoleum with the weight of the Rigby family's story pressing heavily upon his conscience. As he walked back through the cemetery, his flashlight's beam cut through the lingering fog, its light now steady and clear. The air felt less oppressive, the whispers had quieted, and the earlier chill that had clawed at his bones seemed to recede with the retreating darkness. He knew he had a story to tell, a real ghost story that had unfolded through the whispers of the past. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions as he processed the events of the night. He had come seeking inspiration, expecting to fabricate a tale from the whispers of the wind and the shapes in the fog. Instead, he had discovered a tragic truth that had long been buried in the Rigby family's crypt. His role had shifted from a mere observer of the supernatural to a bearer of the family's legacy. With the first rays of dawn piercing the horizon, Alex sat on a worn bench near the cemetery's exit. He pulled out his voice recorder and began to play back the recordings. The soft, eerie whispers of the Rigby spirits filled the morning air, their tale now a tangible thread of reality in his writer's tapestry. He listened intently, pausing at intervals to jot down notes in his notebook, each word carefully chosen to honor the story he had been entrusted with. The spectral voice of the Rigby matriarch had spoken of betrayal and despair, but in her tone, there was also an undercurrent of relief, as if sharing her story had lightened their spectral bonds. Alex felt a profound responsibility to get the story right, to convey not just the horror of their fate, but the injustice that had led to their unending haunting. He envisioned his novel not just as a tale of ghostly horror, but as an exploration of the themes of betrayal, loss, and the quest for justice beyond death. His narrative would weave between the past and the present, telling the Rigby family's story through the findings of a novelist who had come to the cemetery much like himself, seeking inspiration but finding instead a mission. As the sun climbed higher, the cemetery began to lose some of its nocturnal mystique. The fog lifted, revealing the true beauty of the place. Ancient stones stood as silent sentinels of the past, their inscriptions telling tales of lives lived and lost. Alex felt a peace settling over the area, as if his presence and his promise to tell the Rigby family's story had brought some measure of comfort to the restless spirits. Determined to bring closure to the tale, Alex planned his next steps. He would research the Rigby family, delving into historical records and old newspapers to add depth to his narrative. He would also return to the cemetery, perhaps during the day, to capture the essence of the place in the light, contrasting it with the shadowy fears of the night. As he prepared to leave, Alex turned for one last look at the cemetery. The sun's rays illuminated the fog, turning it into a glowing sea that seemed to hold the secrets of the dead. He felt the chill of the night's fears fading away, replaced by a storyteller's resolve to illuminate the dark corners of the Rigby family's history. With the cemetery gates creaking shut behind him, Alex felt a final whisper of the wind, like a soft thank you from the spirits he was leaving behind. The story he would tell would be one of darkness and light, of voices lost and found, and of a writer who entered a cemetery seeking a ghost story and left with a legacy of truth. As he drove away, the cemetery receded into the background, but the voices he had heard would stay with him, guiding his pen as he began the challenging but necessary task of bringing the Rigby family's ghostly whispers to the page. The story would be one of horror, indeed, but also of healing, both for the spirits who had reached out from the grave and for the writer who had learned that some ghosts do not haunt, but rather hope to be heard. As Alex drove home, the experience at the cemetery lingered in his mind like the remnants of a vivid dream. He had left the gates behind, but the whispers of the Rigby family accompanied him, a continuous echo in his thoughts. Back in his study, surrounded by the familiar clutter of books and papers, Alex set about transcribing the recordings. Each whisper, each name, each spoken date was meticulously documented, forming the skeletal framework of his novel. With the novel's foundation set, Alex delved into fleshing out the characters of the Rigby family, drawing from the spectral whispers and his own research. He envisioned each family member, giving them life on paper in a way that death in their real lives had not permitted. Their stories, interwoven with betrayal and tragedy, were more than just plot points. They were a window into a past that refused to be forgotten. The novel progressed, with the narrative split between the past and the present. In the past, readers would see the Rigby family in their final days, the sinister unfolding of their betrayal, and the resultant tragedy. In the present, the protagonist, much like Alex, would uncover these secrets layer by layer, his journey mirroring the reader's discovery. Alex paid particular attention to the atmosphere of both timelines. The past was depicted with a vibrant, yet ominous tone, days filled with life but nights shadowed by the impending doom. The present was shrouded in mist and mystery, with each visit to the cemetery revealing more of the hidden truth. The contrast between day and night, past and present, life and death, was stark, enhancing the suspense and depth of the narrative. As the manuscript neared completion, Alex felt a profound connection to his characters, both living and spectral. He portrayed their emotions and motivations with a sensitivity that transcended the typical horror genre, aiming instead for a story that was as haunting as it was heartfelt. The final chapters were a culmination of this connection, drawing together the threads of the Rigby family's story with a resolution that was both satisfying and somber. The protagonist's last visit to the cemetery was as transformative for him as it was for Alex. It was during this visit that he, guided by the whispers and his own discoveries, performed a symbolic act of restitution for the Rigby spirits. He narrated their story aloud, standing amidst the gravestones, as if to finally acknowledge and validate their presence. This act, laden with emotional gravity, served to release the spirits from their bound existence, offering them peace. In the novel, this scene was pivotal, not just for the plot, but for its thematic resonance. It highlighted themes of redemption, the power of memory, and the importance of history. The protagonist's narrative acted as a bridge between the living and the dead, suggesting that understanding and compassion could transcend even the most profound boundaries. As Alex penned the final words of his novel, he felt a release similar to what he imagined the Rigby spirits must have felt. The story that had started as a whisper in the fog had become a testament to the endurance of the human spirit and the redemptive power of storytelling. His initial fear had transformed into a fulfilling journey of uncovering and sharing truths long silenced. Upon completion, Alex sat back, the manuscript before him, feeling both drained and exhilarated. He had not only written a novel, but had also kept his promise to the spirits that had reached out to him in their eternal restlessness. The echoes of their whispers were now quieted, their story told, their presence acknowledged and remembered. As the novel went to publication, Alex hoped that his readers would find in his story the same profound impact that creating it had on him. The whispers of the Rigby family would no longer be confined to the fog-shrouded cemetery. They would resonate in the minds and hearts of those who read their tale, continuing to echo beyond the pages, just as they had in his life. The story, like the fog at dawn, had lifted to reveal a new understanding, a new connection to the past, forever altering the landscape of his creative and personal journey. As the sun sets, a dense fog blankets the forgotten town on the outskirts of which stands Willow's Keep, an abandoned asylum whose silhouette looms ominously against the darkening sky. The air is filled with a silence so profound it amplifies the smallest of noises, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. Into this setting steps Alex Carter, a young amateur ghost hunter armed with a camera and a host of other paranormal investigation tools. Their voice, calm and measured, narrates their fascination with the abandoned and the haunted, capturing the viewer's attention with a gentle yet compelling tone. Alex's footsteps echo through the empty halls of the asylum, the sound distorted slightly by the acoustics of decayed walls and peeling paint. As they pass through the entrance hall, their camera pans across the grand staircase, lingering on the intricate woodwork now marred by time and neglect. The floor is littered with debris, and every so often, Alex has to step over broken pieces of furniture and shattered glass, their movement cautious and deliberate. The exploration begins in earnest as Alex describes the history of Willow's Keep, once a bustling institution believed to be at the forefront of psychiatric treatment. However, whispered rumors suggest a darker narrative, one of mistreatment and mysterious disappearances. The ghost hunter's voice grows softer as they delve into these rumors, their tone imbued with a hint of unease that perfectly complements the setting. Passing a series of rooms, Alex's attention is drawn to the mirrors that hang askew on the walls or lay abandoned on the floor. Each mirror is coated in dust, but as Alex wipes away the grime from one, they pause. A flicker of movement in the reflection catches their eye. For a moment, it seems as if someone else is standing in the dimly lit hallway behind them. Alex turns quickly, the camera swinging around, only to reveal nothing but the empty corridor. The moment is brief, but the implication lingers, sowing a seed of tension that grows with each step further into the asylum. As the initial exploration continues, the ghost hunter sets up an infrared camera facing down one of the main hallways, a known hotspot for sightings. The device's screen flickers to life, casting an eerie glow in the dim light. Alex's narration continues, their voice a soft murmur blending with the ambient sounds of the building. The occasional creak of wood, the whisper of wind through broken windows. In one large room, which might have once served as the patient common area, Alex finds a cluster of mirrors propped against a wall. The frames are ornate, incongruously elegant amidst the decay. As they examine these mirrors, the reflection shows not the room as it is now, but as it once might have been. Filled with patients, nurses bustling about, a scene of orchestrated chaos frozen in time. Alex captures this on their camera, their excitement palpable yet hushed, not wanting to disturb the eerie calm. The video feed from the infrared camera suddenly shows a shadow passing swiftly down the corridor. Alex reviews the footage, the playback clear despite the low resolution. There's no denying the shape is distinctly human. With a deep breath, the ghost hunter decides to follow the path the shadow took, leading them deeper into the asylum's heart. Each step is accompanied by a deepening dread, a feeling of being watched from the shadows. Alex's normally steady voice trembles slightly as they describe the sensation, their words flowing softly over the haunting soundtrack of the video, a composition of low, resonant tones and the subtle, natural sounds of the building itself. As they continue their journey through Willow's Keep, the night deepens outside, and the wind begins to howl softly around the building's corners. It seems as though the asylum itself is responding to Alex's presence, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. The ghost hunter's narrative guides the viewer deeper into the mystery of the asylum, their voice a beacon in the enveloping darkness, promising more secrets to uncover in the shadows of Willow's Keep. Alex's exploration takes them to the second floor of Willow's Keep, where the air feels markedly colder, a stark contrast to the mild autumn night outside. Their breath appears as mist in the beam of their flashlight, a visual reminder of the chilling change. As they proceed, the floorboards groan underfoot, a constant reminder of the building's age and abandonment. Despite the oppressive atmosphere, Alex's voice remains a soothing presence, discussing the phenomena of cold spots and their association with paranormal activity, adding a layer of scientific curiosity to the palpable tension. The ghost hunter pauses at a series of rooms along the corridor, each door standing ajar as if inviting exploration. Inside one, a large, cracked mirror dominates the far wall, its surface dusty but largely intact. Alex approaches, camera aimed at the glass, and the reflection captured is unsettling. For a moment, it's not Alex's own figure that appears in the mirror but a fleeting image of a group of patients, dressed in the stark, outdated garb of the early 20th century. They're seated at wooden tables, some staring blankly ahead, others engaged in slow, repetitive movements. The image flickers and then returns to the present, showing only Alex and the empty room. This phenomenon is captured live, Alex's quiet narration barely hiding their excitement and fear, noting how the mirror seems to serve as a portal to the past, a window to a time long forgotten. Moving on, the ghost hunter sets up a sound recorder in the hallway, hoping to capture electronic voice phenomena, a common goal in ghost hunting. The device's meters occasionally spike inexplicably, suggesting unseen presences. Alex notes these occurrences, their voice blending with a background of soft, eerie droning from the soundtrack, enhancing the feeling of otherworldly intrusion. In another room, Alex finds remnants of personal belongings, a broken picture frame, a child's doll with one eye missing, a rusted set of keys. Each item is filmed up close, Alex's narrative speculating on the owners and their fates, imbuing each object with a story that speaks of loss and abandonment. This segment not only deepens the atmosphere of haunting and history, but also serves as a reminder of the human element, the lives once intertwined with the asylum's history. As they explore further, a series of soft thuds lead Alex to a stairwell leading to the attic. The sound is rhythmic, almost like footsteps, but when Alex ascends the stairs, the noise ceases abruptly, leaving only the sound of their own breathing and the distant storm outside. In the attic, the air is thick with dust, and the light from the flashlight casts large, looming shadows against the walls. Here, the mirrors are smaller, handheld models, lying scattered among old trunks and furniture. Alex picks one up, peering into the glass, and again sees an image not their own. A stern-looking nurse, her expression severe, her eyes meeting Alex's through the bounds of time. The image is unsettling, and Alex sets the mirror down quickly, their narration breaking for a moment, the calm demeanor faltering under the weight of the encounter. Resuming their exploration, Alex discusses the psychological impact of such phenomena on those who experience them, theorizing about the imprint of emotional energy on physical spaces. Their voice is calm but carries an undertone of deep contemplation, pondering the intersection of past and present, the living and the echoes of the dead. The exploration of the attic reveals more than just artifacts. A large, faded mural on one wall depicts the asylum in its early days, a stark contrast to its current dilapidation. Alex films the mural, narrating about the asylum's history, its initial promise as a beacon of modern mental health care, and its decline into a place of sorrow and fear. As Alex descends back to the lower floors, the sense of being watched intensifies, the cold spots becoming more frequent, and the sound recorder capturing snippets of whispered conversation that seem to come from thin air. The atmosphere grows heavier, the darkness deeper, and the ghost hunter's voice becomes a whisper, drawing the viewer into the palpable sense of growing dread, the boundary between the past and present blurring ever more uncertainly. The night deepens around Willow's Keep as Alex ventures into the basement, the place where most of the asylum's darkest rumors originate. The descent down the creaky wooden stairs is accompanied by a distinct drop in temperature and an increase in electromagnetic field readings, which Alex notes quietly, their voice barely above a whisper. They explain how such readings could indicate the presence of paranormal activity, although they remain skeptical and focused on providing explanations grounded in science. Upon reaching the basement, the flashlight illuminates old stone walls and a floor littered with debris. In the far corner of the room, Alex discovers an array of objects that seem out of place. A neatly arranged set of personal belongings that includes an old, faded diary, several photographs of unidentified individuals, and a small, intricately carved music box. As they examine these items, each object is carefully described, their potential historical and emotional significance pondered in a tone that mixes curiosity with a respectful solemnity. Alex opens the diary, finding entries that date back over 70 years. The pages are filled with the thoughts and daily experiences of a patient who lived in the asylum, and as Alex reads excerpts aloud, their voice captures the despair and confusion of the diary's author. This personal narrative adds a profound depth to the exploration, making the horrors of the past feel immediate and real. Next, Alex winds the music box, and as it begins to play a slow, haunting melody, the atmosphere in the basement shifts. The sound seems to resonate through the room, and for a moment, it feels as though the air itself is thickening. Alex's EMF meter spikes dramatically, and the temperature drops further, a chill that seems to seep into the viewer's bones through the screen. Suddenly, the camera picks up a reflection in a small, cracked mirror leaning against the wall opposite the diary and music box. It shows a fleeting image of a group of patients huddled together, some of them rocking back and forth, others staring emptily into space. Alex captures this reflection, narrating the eerie scene with a voice filled with wonder and empathy. They speculate on the mirror's ability to capture and retain the emotions and experiences of those who lived and suffered within these walls. As the music box's melody fades, the reflection in the mirror slowly disappears, leaving Alex and the viewers with a lingering sense of melancholy. Taking a moment to reflect, Alex discusses the concept of residual hauntings, the theory that emotions can be so powerful they imprint themselves on the physical environment. Their voice is soft, thoughtful, inviting the viewers to consider the nature of memory and the imprint it leaves behind. Compelled to learn more, Alex explores further into the basement, their flashlight revealing old medical equipment and files scattered across the floor. Each step and discovery is narrated with a growing sense of urgency, as if the asylum itself is revealing its secrets piece by piece. They find an old electroshock machine, its leather straps worn and cracked, and a stack of patient files that tell stories of treatments and procedures that would now be considered barbaric. The ghost hunter's voice, rich with emotion, conveys both the historical context and the human cost of such practices. Toward the end of the basement exploration, Alex encounters a large, ornate mirror, the centerpiece of the room. Standing before it, they experience the most intense paranormal phenomenon of the night. The mirror shows not just a reflection but a vivid, moving scene. It depicts a chaotic moment in the asylum's history, a riot, perhaps, or a mass escape attempt, with patients and staff clashing in a frenzy of emotion. The scene plays out silently in the mirror, providing a stark, ghostly reenactment of the past. As the vision fades, Alex steps back, visibly shaken but composed. They discuss the power of places like Willow's Keep to hold onto the past, to echo the joys and sorrows of those who once inhabited them. The segment ends with Alex turning off their camera for a moment of silent contemplation, the weight of the asylum's history pressing close in the cold, dark basement. Leaving the basement, Alex feels a shift in the atmosphere, as if crossing a threshold back into a slightly less oppressive part of Willow's Keep. They head towards the exit, the weight of the night's discoveries palpable in their slow, reflective walk. Their narration resumes, now tinged with the residue of emotional intensity from the basement revelations. They speak of the nature of places like the asylum, repositories of human experience, sorrow, and memory, and ponder on what lessons can be learned from confronting these echoes of the past. As they navigate back through the corridors, Alex stops occasionally to look into the mirrors they'd passed earlier. Now, instead of showing scenes of the past, the mirrors reflect only the tired but enlightened face of the ghost hunter. This change is noted with a gentle, introspective commentary on the transient nature of paranormal experiences and the permanent impact they leave on those who witness them. Reaching the main hall, Alex sets down their equipment, taking a moment to review the footage on their camera. The screen displays snippets of the night's most intense moments, the flickering images in the mirrors, the chilling cold spots, the ghostly reflections of past inhabitants. They narrate over this playback, emphasizing the importance of historical context in understanding present phenomena, and inviting the viewer to reflect on the resilience and tragedies of the human spirit. The storm that had been brewing finally breaks, its rain tapping rhythmically against the broken windows, providing a natural soundscape that blends with the eerie yet calming background music of the video. This sound marks a transition as Alex begins to pack up their equipment. Their narration continues, softer now, more contemplative, speaking directly to the viewer about the personal impact of the night's investigation and the universal desire to connect with the past. As Alex exits the asylum, they pause at the threshold, turning back for a final look at Willow's Keep. The building looms dark and silent against the stormy sky, its mysteries locked away once again. In these final moments, Alex reflects on the nature of fear and curiosity, the drive that leads some to explore the places others avoid, and the quiet bravery it takes to confront the unknown. The drive back home is narrated with a focus on the calm after the storm, both literal and metaphorical. Alex discusses their feelings of accomplishment and relief, mixed with a profound sense of introspection stirred by the night's encounters. They talk about the importance of preserving these stories, not just for thrill seekers and ghost hunters, but for those who seek a deeper understanding of human history and psychology. The video ends with Alex in their home, a safe and warm contrast to the dark, damp confines of the asylum. They offer final thoughts on the night, encouraging viewers to consider not only the scares and adrenaline of ghost hunting, but also the deeper, more human elements that such experiences uncover. The final shot is of the now silent camera equipment, a silent witness to the night's exploration, hinting at future adventures into other haunted locales. The narration fades, leaving viewers with a lingering sense of wonder and perhaps a slight unease, the kind that comes from peering into the unknown and finding something that looks back. The video closes with an invitation to reflect on what it means to explore the edges of human experience, and the screen slowly fades to black, the sounds of the storm providing a natural conclusion to the journey. Dr. Alara Miles arrived at the sprawling estate just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the gravel path that led to an ancient greenhouse. Its glass panels, fogged and cracked by time, whispered secrets of decades past. Alara stepped inside, her footsteps echoing slightly in the vast, empty space that was thick with the scent of decay and damp earth. This greenhouse, once a hub of botanical experiments and vibrant life, now held only the remnants of dead plants, crisp leaves and desiccated vines clinging to rusted frames. It was here, amidst the decay, that Sir Jonathan Harrow, a botanist and an amateur cryptologist, had reportedly made a groundbreaking discovery, a secret that had died with him. The air was cool and still, the kind of stillness that felt almost watchful, as if the greenhouse awaited her with bated breath. As she ventured deeper, Alara's torchlight flickered across several old clocks hanging from the plant-laden walls. They ticked audibly, each showing a time that defied reason: 25:76, 13 hours 62 minutes, 88:91. The sounds of their ticking filled the otherwise silent space, adding an eerie rhythm to her exploration. Intrigued, Alara noted the times in her journal, her scholarly curiosity piqued by the apparent impossibility. The farther she walked, the more intense the ticking became. It was as if the clocks were communicating, guiding her through the twisted paths of withered flora. At times, the ticking seemed to sync with her heartbeat, quickening as she approached the center of the greenhouse, then slowing as she retreated to examine something that caught her eye, a plant that, unlike the others, showed signs of life. Its leaves rustled softly, though there was no breeze to stir them. In a corner shrouded in shadows, she discovered a stack of weathered notebooks. They belonged to Sir Jonathan and were filled with scribbles and diagrams that chronicled his experiments. Time lost and found again, one note read, a clue that perhaps Sir Jonathan's studies had veered into realms beyond traditional botany. These notebooks smelled of mold and old paper, the text faded but still legible under her careful examination. Her fingers traced the words, piecing together the narrative of a man obsessed with the boundaries of time and nature. As she absorbed his words, the atmosphere seemed to press in on her, the air growing denser, as if reacting to the secrets being unearthed. Alara felt a chill run down her spine, not from the cold, but from the realization that she was not just uncovering a botanical study, but possibly a study of time itself, manipulated and maddened by botanical means. A sudden sound, a soft thud from the back of the greenhouse, startled her, breaking her concentration. She lifted her head, listening. It was followed by a scraping noise, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. Heart pounding, Alara called out, "Hello?" But only her echo responded. Gripping her torch tighter, she decided to investigate. As she moved towards the source of the sounds, the clock's ticking became almost deafening, their cacophonous timing disorienting. Each step felt heavier, the ground beneath her seemingly pulsing with a life of its own. When she reached the back wall of the greenhouse, she found another of Sir Jonathan's notebooks, this one more worn than the others, its cover almost completely detached. Inside, the final entries were frantic, filled with sketches of a clock without hands and roots spreading like veins. The key to all, Sir Jonathan had written in a shaky scrawl. Alara, her curiosity now a mix of fear and fascination, felt the weight of her discovery. This was no ordinary greenhouse. It was the heart of Sir Jonathan's obsession, a place where time itself might have been unwound and rewound like the threads of fate. Determined to uncover the full truth, Alara pressed on, her mind racing to connect the strange phenomena of the ticking clocks with the botanical anomalies around her. As the night deepened outside, the greenhouse seemed to close in around her, the shadows deepening, the clocks ticking ever louder. She knew she was on the brink of something profound, her every sense alert to the mysteries that lay hidden in the heart of the timeless greenhouse. As Alara delved deeper into Sir Jonathan Harrow's journals, she uncovered more about his experiments with the greenhouse's unique ecosystem. The entries became increasingly disjointed, a mirror to his unraveling mind as he ventured further into forbidden territories of science. Alara pieced together his attempts to harness the power of these anomalies, creating a bridge between botany and the fabric of time itself. The clocks, as she soon realized, were not merely keeping time but were indicators of its manipulation. Each movement seemed purposeful, orchestrated by the unseen forces at play within the crumbling walls of the greenhouse. Her flashlight caught glimpses of inscriptions on the clock faces, symbols that matched those in Sir Jonathan's notes. They spoke of cycles, of bending the linear path of time into something else entirely. As she continued her exploration, the atmosphere thickened. The air grew heavy, charged with a palpable tension that seemed to resonate with the very pulse of the earth beneath her feet. The plant life around her, long dead to any ordinary observer, appeared to respond to her presence, their withered branches creaking as if whispering secrets long kept. This eerie communication was punctuated by the occasional drop of water, its sound amplified in the overwhelming silence, creating a symphony of drips and ticks. Unnerved yet compelled, Alara followed the path laid out by the increasingly complex clock readings. She found herself at a particularly dense part of the greenhouse where the glass was so fogged that the moonlight could barely penetrate. Here, the clocks showed a time that seemed to loop back on itself, creating a temporal echo that disoriented her sense of reality. The sound of her own breathing became a harsh accompaniment to the surreal scene. Her heart raced as she approached a large, central planter that seemed untouched by the decay that had claimed the rest of the greenhouse. It was an oasis of life in a desert of death, lush and green, with vines that twisted and curled with unnatural vigor. The soil around it was moist, freshly turned, as if someone, or something, had recently been there. Amidst the undergrowth, she discovered another set of Sir Jonathan's notes, these more frantic than the others. They spoke of a breakthrough, a discovery that had promised to change everything. "I have touched the threads of time," one passage read, "and tied them to the roots of existence itself." Beside this entry, a rough sketch of the planter and its contents hinted at the heart of the mystery. The vines, Alara noticed, thrummed with a subtle energy. They seemed to pulse in time with the ticking clocks, each beat drawing her closer to the center of the planter. With trembling hands, she brushed aside the leaves to reveal a small, intricately carved box buried in the rich earth. Its surface was etched with the same symbols found on the clocks and in Sir Jonathan's notes. Inside the box, she found a collection of odd, metallic spheres, each adorned with the same cryptic symbols. They were cold to the touch, yet as she held them, a warmth spread through her palms, an energy that seemed to pulse with life. The spheres vibrated slightly, resonating with the ticking of the clocks around her. Alara arranged the spheres according to the pattern in Sir Jonathan's sketch. As each sphere clicked into place, the ambient noise within the greenhouse changed. The ticking grew synchronized, and a low hum began to fill the air, a sound like the earth breathing. The temperature dropped suddenly, and her breath misted in the chill air. The change in atmosphere was immediate and unnerving. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist, forming patterns that danced along the periphery of her vision. The plant life responded as well, leaves rustling and stems bending towards the planter, as if drawn by an unseen force. Feeling a mix of dread and anticipation, Alara realized she was standing at the epicenter of Sir Jonathan's experiments. This was where he had manipulated the very essence of time, where he had crossed boundaries not meant to be crossed. Her skin prickled with the realization that she might not be alone, that the greenhouse itself was aware of her every move. Despite the fear that clawed at her sanity, Alara's scientific curiosity drove her forward. She needed to understand how far Sir Jonathan had gone, what boundaries he had broken. The air around her vibrated with the legacy of his obsessions, and she felt a deep, almost gravitational pull towards the truths hidden in the heart of the timeless greenhouse. As she stood there, surrounded by the evidence of Sir Jonathan's genius and madness, Alara knew that the night was far from over. Her journey into the depths of the greenhouse's secrets was just beginning, a path that promised revelations and, perhaps, risks that not even Sir Jonathan had foreseen. In the heart of the greenhouse, Alara stood trembling as the reality of her discoveries began to set in. The air was thick with a charged silence that suddenly seemed to crackle with revelation. Her hands hovered over the artifact, a clock without hands, discovered in the hidden chamber beneath the central planter. Its surface was etched with glowing inscriptions that pulsed faintly in the dark, tied intricately to the roots that spread through the soil like a network of veins. Alara's mind raced as she deciphered the inscriptions, each symbol unlocking a fragment of understanding. The writing spoke of time as a living, breathing entity, not just a dimension to be measured, but one to be molded, influenced by the very forces of life itself. Sir Jonathan had theorized that time could be cultivated like the plants in his greenhouse, grown and shaped by his will, but at a cost that seemed increasingly steep. The realization dawned on her that the greenhouse was more than a structure. It was an incubator for a temporal anomaly. The plants, long believed dead, were actually suspended in various states of time, preserved or decayed by Sir Jonathan's manipulations. The clocks were not merely keeping strange time. They were markers of his control, each tick a testament to the power he had wielded and perhaps been consumed by. As she connected the last of the dots, the air around her grew colder, the atmosphere denser. The clocks around the greenhouse began to chime, each strike resonating deeper than the last, echoing through the vast, glass-walled chamber. It was midnight, yet the clocks read impossible times, their chimes out of sync with each other, creating a dissonant symphony that seemed to warp the space around her. Alara felt the weight of isolation, her voice the only human sound amidst the cacophony of ticking and chiming. She spoke aloud, not just to document her findings, but to reassure herself of her presence in the overwhelming strangeness. Her words were swallowed by the thick air, her breath visible in the cold light cast by her flashlight. Turning back to the artifact, Alara traced her fingers over the symbols, each touch sending a shiver through her spine. The glow from the inscriptions intensified, casting eerie shadows across her face. She understood now that this device was the heart of the anomaly, the key to understanding how Sir Jonathan had bent the laws of nature to his will. It was a dangerous knowledge, filled with potential yet fraught with peril. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. The shaking was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but it grew steadily, rumbling that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. The plants around her swayed, and the air filled with the rustling of leaves and the groaning of branches. The clocks accelerated their ticking, the hands spinning wildly, blurring into continuous motion. Fearing the greenhouse might collapse, Alara considered fleeing but was compelled to stay by her need to know, to understand. She recorded everything, her voice steady despite the chaos, describing the scene for posterity. The artifact pulsed faster, its light growing brighter, illuminating the greenhouse in a surreal glow. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the trembling stopped. The clocks halted, their hands fixed at a new series of impossible times. Silence reclaimed the space, profound and heavy. Alara stood alone in the quiet, breathing heavily, her heart pounding in her chest. She realized that she had crossed a threshold into a realm of knowledge few had ever known. In that moment of quiet, after the storm of revelations, Alara felt a profound connection to Sir Jonathan's legacy. She was no longer just a visitor to his world. She had become a part of the narrative he had left behind. With a mix of fear and awe, she resolved to complete her study, to document her findings in the hope that they might serve as both a beacon and a warning for those who might follow in her footsteps. The final entry in her audio log captured the essence of her journey. A journey not just through space but through time, through the possibilities of what might be achieved when human curiosity meets the unknown forces of nature. As she prepared to leave the greenhouse, Alara felt a lingering sense of unease, a sense that the mystery she had unraveled was but one layer of many, the secrets of the greenhouse as endless and intricate as the ticking of the clocks that filled its air. Alara stepped out of the greenhouse, her mind a tumult of thoughts and theories, each more incredible than the last. As she walked away, she could feel the pull of the greenhouse lessening, its mysterious grip on her psyche unwinding with each step she took. But the relief was fleeting. The further she walked, the more she felt a haunting sense of incompleteness, as if she were leaving a part of herself behind in that strange, timeless place. Her footsteps crunched softly on the gravel path, the night air cool and crisp against her skin. She paused, looking back over her shoulder at the greenhouse, its structure now just a dark silhouette against the night sky. The clocks within may have stopped, but the ticking echoed in her ears, a reminder of the unnatural experiences she had endured. The clock's hands might have paused, but time for her would never feel the same again. As she made her way back to the estate's main house, Alara mulled over her next steps. The evidence she had gathered was incontrovertible, yet explaining the phenomena without sounding mad was a challenge she would soon have to face. The academic world was often unforgiving to those who ventured too far from accepted theories and practices. She decided that her findings needed to be compiled and shared, but cautiously. The notion of manipulating time, of interacting with it in such a tangible way, could revolutionize science or doom it. The dangers were too real, the implications too vast. Sir Jonathan's obsession had led him to isolation and madness, a fate Alara was keen to avoid. Back in her temporary office, Alara started transcribing her notes and audio recordings, her words a soft murmur in the quiet room. The task was cathartic, helping her to process what she had witnessed. She detailed the layout of the greenhouse, the bizarre behavior of the clocks, the plant that seemed to defy natural order, and the handless clock with its pulsating glow. Each fact was meticulously noted, her scientific rigor a bulwark against the creeping dread that what she had experienced bordered on the fantastical. As she worked, the early hours of the morning ticked by, unnoticed by Alara. Her focus was absolute, her need to make sense of the chaos paramount. The document she created was both a report and a map, guiding any who might follow in her footsteps through the labyrinthine complexities of the greenhouse and its temporal anomalies. Her final notes were a series of recommendations, cautionary tales really, advising against further exploration without extensive preparation and understanding. She highlighted the potential risks, not only to physical safety but to psychological well-being. The greenhouse was not just a building. It was a portal to something beyond current human comprehension. With her report completed, Alara felt a weight lift from her shoulders, though it was replaced by a different kind of burden, the weight of responsibility. She knew that her discovery could not be unmade, that knowledge once gained could not be ignored. It would have to be shared, but carefully, with those who could appreciate its significance and handle its implications. As dawn broke, casting pale light through the windows of her office, Alara allowed herself a few moments of rest. Her eyes closed, but sleep did not come easily. The images of the ticking clocks, the glowing inscriptions, and the living plant haunted her, dancing behind her eyelids. When she finally rose from her chair, the world outside seemed unchanged. The sun rose as it always did, the birds sang, and the wind whispered through the trees. But for Alara, everything was different. She had touched the fabric of the universe, felt its give and pull, and she could not unfeel it. Her departure from the estate was quiet, her report locked away in her briefcase, a Pandora's box of scientific revelation. As she drove away, her rearview mirror framed the estate until it disappeared from view. The greenhouse was out of sight, but it would never be out of mind. Its mysteries had changed her, shaped her into a keeper of secrets, a guardian of forbidden knowledge. The road ahead was uncertain, paved with both opportunity and danger, but Alara Miles was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the truth of the timeless greenhouse. On a chilly evening shrouded in mist, Dr. Eliana Morgenstern arrived at the gates of an ancient monastery nestled high in the secluded mountains. The structure, centuries old, stood as a silent sentinel overlooking dense, whispering forests. As the heavy wooden doors groaned open, Eliana stepped inside, her presence disrupting the solemn silence that enveloped the stone corridors. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows along the walls, shadows that seemed to move just beyond the edge of sight. Eliana, known for her rational mind and expertise in treating phobias, found the setting both intriguing and unnerving. Her task was to help a group of monks who had developed an inexplicable fear of the dark, a profound terror that seemed out of place in their normally stoic lives. As she walked through the dimly lit hallways to her quarters, the monastery's history weighed heavily on her. Legends spoke of it as a place of spiritual encounters and dark rituals, but Eliana, a firm believer in the explainable, attributed these stories to superstition. Settling into her room, the psychologist unpacked her things and prepared for the evening. The room was Spartan, with only a small bed, a writing desk, and a narrow window that overlooked the mountainous landscape. The wind howled outside, a mournful sound that mingled with the distant chants of the monks during their evening prayers. Eliana tried to focus on her notes, but the dancing shadows at the periphery of her vision drew her attention away. She noticed that the darker it got, the more the shadows seemed to stir, twisting along the edges of the room. Determined to keep her mind focused, Eliana reviewed the files of the monks she would be counseling. Each reported similar experiences: sensations of being watched from the shadows, whispers at night, and a pervasive dread that deepened with the setting sun. Initially skeptical, Eliana considered psychological explanations, perhaps a shared delusion or a reaction to environmental stressors. Yet, as the night progressed, and the monastery seemed to creak and settle into deeper darkness, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. As she prepared for bed, the candlelight in her room flickered violently, casting large, looming shadows that danced across the walls. The light struggled against the encroaching darkness, and for a moment, Eliana felt a chill that went deeper than the mountain cold. It was as if the darkness itself had substance, a presence that didn't appreciate being observed. Shaking off the feeling, she reminded herself of her scientific grounding and the need to remain objective. That night, Eliana lay in her bed, listening to the sounds of the monastery. The wind continued its relentless assault on the ancient walls, and somewhere in the distance, a door slammed shut, echoing through the empty halls. Sleep proved elusive as the whispers began. At first, she thought it was the wind, or perhaps the monks still awake and praying. But as she strained to listen, the whispers seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. A cacophony of indistinct voices that beckoned her from the edge of sleep. Frustrated and tired, Eliana decided to investigate. If she was to help her patients, she needed to understand the source of their fear, even if it meant confronting her own. Grabbing her flashlight, she ventured out into the corridor. The monastery at night was a different creature, alive with shadows that seemed to watch her every move. The flashlight's beam pierced the darkness, casting sharp, angular shadows that fled from the light but gathered again behind her, always just out of sight. As she walked, the whispers grew louder, a tangled mess of sounds that seemed almost pleading. Eliana followed them down the winding staircases to the lower levels of the monastery, where the oldest parts of the building lay. Here, the air was cooler, the scent of mold and ancient stone more pronounced. The monks rarely ventured here, and the neglect was evident. Cobwebs draped over forgotten relics, and dust lay thick upon the floor, undisturbed but for the path she now made. The whispers led her to an old library, a vast room filled with tomes and manuscripts that chronicled the monastery's long history. As her flashlight swept over the shelves, it caught something unusual: a series of old books that seemed out of place among the religious texts. They were darker, their covers etched with strange symbols that shimmered slightly under the light. With a hesitant hand, Eliana reached out and took one of the books, the leather cold and strangely supple. Opening the book, she found it written in a language she didn't recognize, filled with diagrams and sketches that twisted the eyes. The whispers crescendoed into clarity as she turned the pages, the words sounding out in her mind with terrifying clarity. They spoke of other realms, of beings that dwelled in darkness, feeding on fear and human emotion. As she read, the shadows in the corners of the room grew denser, and a cold dread settled over her heart. Realizing that she might be dealing with something far beyond simple phobias, Eliana closed the book sharply. The whispers stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so heavy it was almost suffocating. She knew then that the monk's fear was not unfounded. There was something here, something ancient and dark that had awakened. With the book in her hand, Eliana made her way back to her room. Morning was still hours away, and she needed to think, to plan her next move. As she lay back in bed, the shadows seemed to press closer than ever, as if curious about her newfound knowledge. Eliana understood now that she was not just dealing with a psychological anomaly, but perhaps a real and present danger. But she was not deterred. Her fear, though palpable, was also a source of fascination, and she knew that understanding this darkness was the key to dispelling it, not just for the monks, but for herself as well. As dawn filtered through the narrow window of her room, casting long, thin shadows across the stone floor, Dr. Eliana Morgenstern prepared for her first full day at the monastery. She had barely slept, the images from the strange book haunting her dreams. Yet, her determination to uncover the source of the monk's fears and confront whatever lurked in the shadows had only strengthened. During her morning consultations, Eliana listened intently to the monks describe their experiences. Each tale shared a common thread, sightings of indistinct figures and overwhelming sensations of dread as the day faded into night. These sessions occurred in a small, sparsely furnished room where the light from the single window waned as the day progressed, deepening the sense of foreboding that seemed to permeate the monastery's thick walls. In the pauses between sessions, Eliana pondered the connections between the monk's symptoms and the lore contained within the old book. She hypothesized that the monastery's past as a place of dark rituals might have imbued it with a residual presence, something possibly stirred by the monk's own fears. As she mulled over these thoughts, a sudden chill would occasionally sweep through the room, as if affirming her suspicions. That afternoon, she decided to explore the monastery further. Her footsteps echoed through the deserted cloisters and chapels, the air heavy with the scent of incense and old wood. In the chapel, the afternoon light streamed through stained glass, painting the pews in vibrant hues. Yet, even here, in the light of day, the shadows at the corners of her vision persisted, shifting subtly. Eliana's exploration led her to the monastery's garden, a walled enclosure that had run wild with neglect. The overgrown plants cast gnarled shadows on the ground, moving with the wind. As she walked among them, she felt eyes on her back, watching, waiting. The feeling grew stronger, and turning abruptly, she could almost catch the glimpse of something vanishing into the undergrowth. A trick of the light, perhaps, but unnerving all the same. Later, she visited the infirmary where ancient texts on medicinal herbs were stored. The room was dim, the small windows filtering the late afternoon sun into mere slivers of light. The shelves were lined with dusty bottles and leather-bound books. As she examined one of the texts, a shadow passed over the page. Looking up, she saw nothing that could have cast it. It was then she heard a soft whisper, almost a sigh, from the dark corner of the room. When she approached, there was nothing but an old, wooden chair and a pile of tattered blankets. That evening, as darkness fell and the monastery settled into an uneasy silence, Eliana sat in her room, reviewing her notes. The connections were becoming clearer, the shadows more persistent in their appearances. She felt a growing urge to confront whatever was manifesting these shadows, to challenge it directly and perhaps understand its nature. Preparing for the night, Eliana gathered a few essentials: her flashlight, the old book, and a small digital recorder to capture any phenomena. She ventured out into the monastery's hallways, which were now bathed in an almost palpable darkness. The only sounds were her own footsteps and the occasional distant echo of a door closing. Her path led her back to the library where she had found the book. She set up her recorder on a table, nestled among the ancient texts. Sitting in the darkness, she waited, the silence around her deepening. Minutes stretched into hours, and just as she began to doubt, the whispers returned. They were clearer now, distinct voices that seemed to be conversing in a language she did not understand. Eliana spoke softly into the darkness, asking who was there, what they wanted. The whispers paused, and then, in a fleeting moment of clarity, she heard her name whispered back. It was a chilling moment, one that confirmed her fears. She was not alone. More voices joined, a cacophony of sounds that filled the library. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to converge on her. Flicking on her flashlight, she scanned the room. The light seemed to scatter the shadows, and for a moment, she thought she saw the outline of a figure near the back shelf. It disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving her to question whether it had been there at all. Eliana continued to record, asking questions and waiting for responses. The whispers varied, some curious, others menacing. Through this eerie dialogue, she pieced together that the entity, or entities, were drawn to the monastery because of the rituals performed centuries ago. They thrived in the shadows, fed by fear and darkness. As the night waned, Eliana felt both a scholar's intrigue and a primal fear. The monastery held secrets that were slowly revealing themselves, intertwined with the very fabric of the place. She knew that understanding these shadowy presences could be key to helping the monks and perhaps dispelling the darkness that held sway over this ancient sanctuary. As the first light of dawn began to seep through the library windows, Eliana packed away her equipment. The night had been revealing, but she knew there was much more to learn. She was resolved to continue her research, driven by a desire to uncover the truth hidden in the dark corners of the monastery. With the dawn breaking over the mountains, Dr. Eliana Morgenstern felt a fleeting sense of relief as she watched the sunlight dispel the shadows that had so thoroughly dominated the monastery during the night. Her experiences, captured both in her notes and on the digital recorder, painted a complex picture of an ancient, lingering presence fueled by the dark energies of past rituals. As she prepared for another day of consultations with the monks, her mind was abuzz with theories. Perhaps the shadows were not just manifestations of fear, but sentient beings, remnants of the consciousness invoked by those long-forgotten ceremonies. Eliana's plan for the day was to delve deeper into the monastery's archives, seeking any records of the rituals that might have been conducted, hoping to find a clue on how to mitigate the fears pervading the monastery. During her sessions, Eliana introduced her findings to the monks, explaining her belief that their fears might be amplified by the energies trapped within the monastery's walls. Her approach shifted from purely psychological counseling to a form of therapeutic confrontation, encouraging the monks to share their experiences openly, to bring the shadows into the light of discussion. This method seemed to resonate, and as the monks spoke, a pattern emerged. Each sighting and each whisper was tied not just to the night, but to specific locations within the monastery known for historical significance. Armed with this new information, Eliana spent the afternoon in the deepest parts of the monastery's library, surrounded by dusty tomes and ancient manuscripts. The texts were difficult to decipher, many written in archaic languages, but bit by bit, she pieced together the history of a specific chamber within the monastery that served as the heart of the ritual practices. It was a secluded room, long sealed and forgotten, located beneath the monastery's main chapel. Feeling a mixture of dread and anticipation, Eliana decided to visit the chamber. She found the entrance hidden behind a heavy tapestry in the chapel, a narrow doorway leading down to a steep, winding staircase. The air grew cooler as she descended, the oppressive silence of the place thick with the echoes of the past. The chamber at the bottom was circular, the walls lined with faded frescoes depicting celestial alignments and otherworldly beings. In the center of the room stood an ancient altar, stone worn smooth by centuries of use. The air around the altar was markedly colder, and as Eliana approached, she felt the familiar prickling of her skin, the sensation of being watched. She set up her equipment, placing the digital recorder on the altar and turning on a small, battery-powered lamp to light the room. As she began to speak, addressing the shadows directly, the temperature in the room dropped further, and a palpable tension filled the air. She asked questions, probed for answers, and as she did, the recorder captured fluctuations in the ambient noise, a low murmur that seemed to respond to her queries. The responses, though not always clear, suggested that the entities were ancient, perhaps as old as the monastery itself, and bound to the location by the energies of the rituals performed. They spoke of their existence in a state between worlds, drawn to the fear and emotion of the living, but unable to fully manifest without the energy provided by such feelings. Eliana theorized that if she could somehow cleanse or neutralize the chamber, she might reduce the presence and influence of the shadows. Using a combination of her psychological training and the ritualistic knowledge gleaned from the texts, she began an impromptu ceremony of her own design. She focused on projecting calm and understanding, on acknowledging the presence of the shadows, but also on asserting the sanctity and peace of the monastery. As she proceeded, the air in the chamber began to shift. The cold receded slightly, and the oppressive atmosphere lightened. It was a subtle change, but for Eliana, it was a sign that her efforts were having an effect. She continued, speaking words of peace and closure, urging the shadows towards rest. When she finished, the chamber felt undeniably different. The heavy air of mystery and dread was not gone, but it had diminished. As Eliana packed up her equipment, she felt a cautious optimism. Her actions might not have banished the shadows completely, but perhaps they had initiated a process of healing, both for the monastery and for the monks who lived there. Leaving the chamber, Eliana realized that the true test would come with time. Would the monks experience a decrease in their nighttime fears? Would the shadows retreat, satisfied with the acknowledgement and the attempt to address their presence? Only time would tell, but as she ascended the stairs back to the chapel, she felt a lightness in her step, a sense that whatever the outcome, she had confronted something extraordinary and had not flinched. As the days passed following her ritual in the sealed chamber, Dr. Eliana Morgenstern observed a noticeable shift in the atmosphere of the monastery. The monks reported a gradual decrease in their nocturnal fears, and the pervasive sense of dread that had once hung over the ancient stone walls seemed to dissipate. The shadows, while not completely gone, appeared less frequently and with diminished intensity. Eliana documented these changes meticulously, noting each monk's individual progress and any recurring phenomena. In her final days at the monastery, Eliana conducted follow-up sessions with the monks, integrating traditional psychological therapy with discussions about the historical and spiritual significance of their experiences. She encouraged them to continue the practices she had initiated, blending mindfulness with the acknowledgement of the monastery's past to maintain the peace they were beginning to experience. As she prepared to leave, Eliana felt a mix of satisfaction and curiosity. The reduction in fear and the positive feedback from the monks suggested that her efforts had made a real impact. Yet the true nature of the shadows remained a mystery. Were they truly spirits or remnants of the past, or simply manifestations of human fear amplified by the monastery's atmosphere? Eliana pondered these questions as she packed her belongings, her mind already drafting papers and presentations that would discuss her unique findings. On her last evening, the head monk invited her to a farewell dinner, held in the monastery's refectory. The monks, normally reserved, expressed their gratitude with warmth and openness. They shared stories of the monastery's history, not as tales of fear, but as a heritage of deep spiritual significance. The head monk presented Eliana with a small, ancient relic, a piece of the monastery's original foundation stone. It was a token of appreciation and a symbol of the psychological and spiritual foundations she had helped to strengthen. During the dinner, the conversation turned to the future. The monks expressed a newfound interest in engaging with the outside world, in sharing their sanctuary with those who might be seeking peace and understanding. Eliana encouraged this idea, suggesting that the monastery could serve as a retreat for those dealing with psychological struggles, where they could find solace and perhaps confront their own shadows in the supportive environment she had helped foster. As night fell and Eliana retired to her room for the last time, she reflected on her journey. The experience had challenged her beliefs and expanded her understanding of the psychological landscape. The interplay between mind and environment, history and perception, had never been so vividly illustrated for her. She realized that this experience would shape her future work, perhaps leading her to explore other places where the shadows of history and human consciousness intertwined. Before dawn, Eliana left the monastery. As she descended the mountain path, the first light of morning painted the peaks in hues of gold and amber. The monastery behind her seemed serene, nestled among the whispering trees, a silent guardian of centuries-old secrets. Eliana felt a deep connection to the place, a thread woven into the fabric of her own life story. She knew she would return someday, drawn back by the mystery and the tranquility that had enveloped her during her stay. As she reached the base of the mountain, Eliana turned for one last look at the monastery. It stood there, as it had for hundreds of years, a beacon of mystery and recovery. With a sense of closure and a promise of new beginnings, she started her journey back to her life in the city, carrying with her the lessons of the shadows and the light they had taught her to see. Her time at the monastery had come to an end, but the impact of her work, like the echoes of the whispers in the dark, would resonate far beyond the stone walls and into the lives of all who had shared in her journey.